Welcome you to the main event, and that's the webinar series where we walk through the 2022 State of Customer Success Survey. Again, we do this every year. We send it out to the community. We ask for your help, kind of to give, to get, to share insights about your experience, your company, your strategy, your tools, all kinds of things so that we can all learn together and kind of understand together what are the benchmarks, what are the trends, how are we progressing as a global customer success community. And so we're excited to share those results today with you and look forward to having an engaging discussion. I'm going to lead the discussion, and Kristi's going to add some color commentary with us as we go along, and we'll jump right in. So this survey, just to give you an idea of the participants, this year we had 737 professionals who participated in the survey. We're grateful for each one of you that participated. If there are those on the call who participated, thank you. It represented 28 different countries and 680 different companies. So we feel like we got a really good sliver of all different sizes of companies, different strategies, and those types of things. And that hopefully that will help contribute to a good insights today. Across the customer, if you just look across it. Now, I'll just say with this, certainly the data is representative of those individuals, the 700 some odd individuals. So there may be insights that we shared today that may feel a little bit off to you, and we certainly recognize that. Hopefully everything will resonate really well from you, but we only have data for the sample size that we have. So that's what we're representing today as a sample size. So within that group, 64% of the teams that we surveyed this year have grown in the last 6 months, which was really cool. Now, this was done in June. We know that things have slowed down a little bit, but it's really neat to see that that we're still growing. Even at the beginning of the recession, you see that most of the teams that we surveyed are continuing to grow. The medium team size was 8. The total customer success teams as a total of the total employee base for each company represented about 5% of the total employee base. So if I had certainly 100 employees, customer success team typically represent five of those employees. And then it looks like that the revenue represented by customer success typically is around 8.1% of all revenue is invested back into customer success. So those are a few high-level stats that we'll just share at the beginning. The first section we wanted to share was really related to DEI, and we've done this for various years. One of the questions we ask is how many out of all the individuals on your team, how many of them are represented as women on your team? This is always a fun stat to look at, because in 2022, 59% of all customer success teams are made up of women, which is awesome. I think our space, and Kristi maybe add, our space is a unique one in that, where I think we can lead out in all of SaaS in that regard of representation and leadership across from women. And it's so phenomenal to see that, and for all of us to benefit from our peers out there in the space. Any quick thoughts there, Kristi?
No, I mean, I obviously, I love to continue to see this grow and diversify. It'll be interesting to see how this stacks up to, I think, like marketing, where I think historically had probably been the leading industry where we would have seen women represented there. So it'd be interesting to see how customer success, at least in the SaaS ecosystem, might be pulling ahead there. But I obviously, as a female leader, love to see this stat.
Yes, and if we look at how that changed in the last year it was 56%. So we've made some improvement, which is always good, and hopefully we'll continue to see this trend go further. This is representative CSMs. Now, if we look at leaders that are women, looks like 52% of all customer success leaders in the sample size are women, which is great, and that's up from 48% last year. So I love the trend, want to continue to see it increase much better, and excited to see the continued progress there. The next one we looked at was looking at our peers who are people of color. in customer success, and this is for CSMs, frontline CSMs. We could do better here. Only 23%, which is kind of disappointing when I saw the result there. That's up only 2% last year. And so I think we have some room to grow there, definitely. This is a little bit not good enough at all. And so I think that there's our encouragement is across all of us is to change this over the coming years, to be deliberate and thoughtful as teams and leaders in changing this stat. And I'll share, if you look at it from a leadership perspective, similar numbers. If you look at 2022, 22% of all customer success leaders are people of color, and that's only up to 1% since last year. So, Kristi, any thoughts there?
I mean, listen, we talked about this, right? Like, I know that there are a lot of teams who are really putting forth a concerted effort to diversify. There are really great groups. I don't know if everyone's seen, but there is a community, Success in Black, which is, obviously representing folks of color. I think that's a great example of the types of organizations we all need to be leaning into and supporting more broadly to help amplify the voices and giving opportunities to more diverse groups. I'm saddened by this number. As a minority woman myself, as a Hispanic woman, I'd love to see the stats around that, but these are they're groups that we need to do better by. And I do think there's more visibility and more momentum there, but again, we collectively as a community really need to help elevate and create new opportunities to bring in folks.
Agreed. And so I think our call to action to all of us is to unite and change these numbers over the next year and coming years. And we invite everybody to join us in that effort. Moving on to the next one, we asked we asked about the reporting structure of customer success teams, particularly who does the customer success team report into. Not a lot of change from last year. In fact, if you're to look at the graph is almost identical to last year, except for one notable change, and that is the rise of the CRO. CRO was down a third or fourth last year. This year it went to second, which is an interesting trend to see the rise, the increased number of CROs out there, leaders who own all revenue, including sales and success. And so that's an interesting note. I was thinking that the CCO position would move significantly. We kind of saw the CCO position stay steady, and really the CRO position a leapfrog. Any thoughts there, Kristi?
I mean, listen, it's no surprise. We've had this great debate, right? Whether our customer success should own revenue. And I think in organizations where there is less sophistication around orchestrating a customer success function, it's easy to say, well, they own revenue, put them under the CRO. As an individual who's reported to a CRO before in my career, I don't love it. I can see why companies do it, but I do think allow the chief customer officer to own the revenue independent of net new sales and break it out. If you do want to put it under one umbrella, I'd love to see the chief customer officer kind of over sales. Yeah. It'd be interesting to see that, right? And when we think about customer centricity as a culture and a movement, I'd love to see more companies embrace that, right? As a real customer first mindset.
I agree. I'm predicting that we will see that more often. We'll see if people can maybe remember next year, and we'll see if my words are true. But I think the CCO will continue to rise in stature or importance in organizations. We'll see more of them, and we'll see more revenue owned by the CCOs going forward. So we'll see how that shakes out over the next year.
You have someone in the chat who said that their CCO owns the sales function. So I love that. Hopefully we'll see more of it. I'm watching the chat here to see what else is going on, but I think there's a lot more interest in seeing it either broken out, empower the chief customer officer to own that revenue, or even have them kind of own the sales function too. So we'll see.
There's a note in here asking for clarification whether CCO is chief commercial officer or chief customer officer. In this case, my apologies. We're talking about chief customer officer. And we want these chief customer officers to be the chief commercial officer, I guess is what we're saying. But exciting to see that, see the strong reporting structure into the CEOs. And And we hope that that continues to increase. That's ultimately where we want to see these organizations roll straight into the CEO. Okay, next, salaries. So this might be interesting for everybody. It looks like we asked a little bit about salaries, and we calculated the average salaries here. The nice thing that you'll see on here is that salaries are up across the board. And so with the biggest increase in average salary being at the manager level, which is up 16%, but the other ones are average about 7 or 8% increase as well. So pretty interesting there. It's also notable to look to kind of see the ladder, the tenure to different levels. It looks like that the average customer success professional is about 4.5 years into that role. Managers usually hit manager about 6.5 years. 2 more years to director, another 4 years to VP, and then we didn't see a big difference in the tenure between VPs and chief customer officers or in that regard. Any notes there, Kristi?
Well, Dave, there's a lot of chat here. Folks want to know, is this OTE? Is this base?
I believe it was, and I will check. We'll double check to look at the exact wording. I think it's a total comp OTE.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
We'll double check. Oh, you there?
Oh, I'm still here.
We'll double check on that and try to come back at the end of the webinar to clarify exactly what the question was, but I believe it was OTE. Let's jump over to pay structures now. This one was interesting. I thought there would be a little bit change. So we asked, what is the pay structure? Is it base only, base plus bonus, base plus commission, and base plus variable? You'll see that base plus bonus is the predominant comp structure, and then base plus variable. And then we asked about the split. If you have any kind of variable, what was the variable split? Surprisingly, the highest variable split was 90-10, which all of these numbers, all these splits were almost identical to last year. Not a lot of changes, maybe 1% or 2 there. I got to be honest, I thought that we would see the variables get higher, that they would move from 90-10 down to closely like 80-20 or maybe even 70-30. So I was surprised that it stayed pretty static. How about you, Kristi?
Yeah, I was shocked. I think for most of the compensation packages that I've prepared as a leader, I've really kind of probably aligned closer with the 80-20, depending on the organization. Some actually 75-25, but 80-20 seemed to be more of my norm. So I was surprised to see it still sitting at 90-10.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that as customer success teams continue to own revenue or gain ownership of revenue, my guess is that these will go that direction. It'll go closer to 80-20 or 75-25, somewhere in that range, as hopefully, because I think it does a good job of rewarding customer success professionals for the work that they're doing.
Yeah, incentivizes the behavior you want to see, right?
Yep, and that could be a whole topic for another webinar for sure, because there's a lot of debate about pay comp structures in customer success. We'll save that debate for another time. share the data. Okay, across the group that we measured, it looked like that the typical book of business was about 95 customer success customers per CSM or CSP, and an average book of business about 1.6. Kristi, what are your thoughts there? My initial thought was maybe that I thought it was a little high, but any perspective from you? Maybe we differ in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the number was high to me as well, but I do know that there are individual contributors who could participate in the survey that are carrying a much larger book, right? CSM is a representative of all different engagement types and strategies. So I bet that there was a bunch that kind of skewed this. I felt like 95 was high because it seemed to be that a lot more teams were in that kind of mid to high engagement model. But like I said, I'm sure just based on all of the responses that we got, there was probably a handful that skewed that.
Okay, I know there's a lot of chatter on here. Some are saying 95, that's crazy. It's way too high. And others are saying, I wish I had 95. I'm managing 150
This
or
goes
whatever.
back to that the diversified
Exactly.
strategies. Don't forget, right? The complexity of the product. There's so many factors that play a role into creating appropriate leverage ratios. So if you're on here and you're a CSM managing way more than 95 accounts, it's probably by design. And then for other folks where it's a lot less than that, again, it's probably part of your strategy.
Agreed. Just looking at one other note here. Let me just pull that back up. We did note, Ed noted that our good friend, hi Ed, noted that it's a little bit lower than last year. Last year, we recorded 104 as the average. Somebody asked whether the 1.6 is ARR, and that is true. Last year, it was 1.7. So it's come down a little bit. And Ed, we could certainly maybe use you as our statistical professional in all these to make sure that these are in line with your strategies. We love the work that you do. All right, let's look at key performance indicators. So what KPIs are customer success teams held accountable for? And not a lot of change since last year. Still, I think last year NRR was number one. So we see that as this year as well. Number two is renewals. Usage and adoption is number three. Expansion revenue, customer outcomes, and engagement activities. It was interesting. We didn't add it this year, but it related to customer outcomes. We asked how many are actually tracking customer outcomes. So we talk about customer outcomes a lot, but we've seen sometimes that there's not the diligence in capturing and tracking towards the completion of customer outcomes. It looked like about 60%, if I remember right, are capturing it, but there's still a lot that aren't capturing those on a regular basis. So one thing that we encourage you to do is find a way to capture customer outcomes and consider adding that as a key area that you're looking at across your team.
Dave, I see
yes.
that a lot of these folks probably don't have great ways to track that, and that becomes a big challenge as well.
Yes.
You know, not to do a slight plug there for us, but obviously that was part of our design, right? When we saw some of this data last year, we designed that into our product to make sure that you could track it. I've heard from a lot of CSMs so that's a big pain point for them, that even when they are getting to a place to identify those outcomes, capturing them, keeping them, managing to them becomes a big challenge.
Yep. I agree. There's some chatter in here about MPS, why MPS wasn't on there, which was interesting. I think I don't remember that it was on last year. I think it was a part of some of the data that they were collecting. There was a second slide around customer data. I think Kristi and I both agree MPS is not something to measure your customer success team by. It's certainly, we are believers on it. But our joint belief is not measuring your customer success team, because there's so many factors that go into the NPS score. But we do believe in capturing NPS as one signal around customer health and feedback. We believe in getting feedback any way you can. NPS is certainly one avenue to get feedback, but certainly we would not advocate using that as a measure for your customer success team, a performance measure. Right, Kristi?
I have nothing else to add, Dave. Yes, absolutely. I mean,
I knew you did.
I'm still somebody who loves NPS, and I feel like that's not popular opinion these days. Yeah. I love it. I love it as a tool. I love it as a mechanism for conversations and for collecting feedback. But gosh, please do not hold your CSMs accountable for NPS. It is a company metric. It is a performance score for your entire organization, not an individual.
There we go. Thank you. All right, average retention rate. So if you're looking at your book of business, wondering where you are, this is certainly, again, it's hard because different segments of customers have different bands and benchmarks across the entire network that we surveyed. The average was around 89 for gross, 101 for net, and 90 for logo. Next year, we'll look to break those out, because if you look at mid-market, if you look at SMB, you look at mid-market, and you look at enterprise, they typically go in different bands from lower SMB, mid and mid-market, and higher for enterprise. So take this with a grain of salt. This was just across everybody that we surveyed, and those are some examples of retention rates that you could look at. Okay, this is always a popular subject. Who owns a renewal? So this year it was 51% customer success, 24% sales, 16 was shared between sales and success, or renewals team and success, and 9% were from a renewals team. The change this year between last year, sales represented 18%. So sales has picked up a little bit more ownership of the renewals in the last year, which was a little bit surprising to me. And we looks like that there was less in this sample size who had a separate renewals team who own the renewals. Any insights there or thoughts about this metric, Kristi?
I mean, I don't mind having other teams own the renewal. I think depending on the complexity of the deal and if you're selling into enterprise, right, all those things make a ton of sense. What's interesting to me is, where does the renewals team roll up, right? And if it's shared across, is it shared with sales and CS, or is it shared with renewals and CS, right? Like those different combinations of it being a shared owned responsibility. I'm okay working together and collaborating on it, because I think in a lot of cases it makes a ton of sense. It's just where that rolls up to me is more interesting than just these outputs alone. I am shocked to see 24% of that still has the sales team running it. I'd be interested to dig into that data to understand, like, what is the driver behind it, right? Is it the type of company? Is it the size? Is there something, or is it just really transactional, right? It's in some of these companies, right, it doesn't even make sense to have CS own it, because it's just a sales motion. It's maybe quick and probably even something you can automate online. Who knows? But those would be interesting to unpack in the sales owning it, because I have a hard time justifying why you would distract your net new sales team with managing renewals.
Yeah, I agree. Typically it's complexity and specialization in some sense that makes sense for individual businesses. I'd note the one thing for leaders out there is, as you continue to take on more ownership for this revenue, please be sure to empower and enable your teams to be able to do that adequately. A lot of times we see leaders who want to take on revenue, but they don't give the same coaching and mentoring on the renewal and revenue side of the business that they do another side, and teams can struggle in that regard. So provide coaching on that side, provide mentoring, and make sure that your team is fully enabled and empowered to navigate those renewals in an effective way. So, all right, let's jump in. On the expansion, so we talked about renewals. Who owns expansion? 69% say customer success teams, or 69% of those say that the customer success team plays a part. 56, I know these don't add up to 100. It's what percentage of have these teams involved. So 69% say CS teams involved, 56 say the sales team. So there is some overlap there, and it probably depends on the customer segment and the expansion type. Only 9 say they have a dedicated expansion team, and then 8% say that their renewals team is engaged in the expansion side of the business. Okay, so with this, if our teams aren't owning the expansion, are they at least getting credit for what we call CSQLs? So customer success qualified leads. Only 31% said yes. And Kristi and I think we both are united in saying I would look at adding this. Kristi, what you had some good thoughts on this. Maybe share your thoughts on measuring CSQLs.
Gosh, I mean, this just goes back to attribution. We are constantly advocating for ourselves, trying to prove our value, right, in customer success. I hear this from leaders all the time, yet this is a huge missed opportunity, right? You want to have a voice, you want to be heard, you want to be able to get the resources and the support across the organization. Gosh, this is it. If you're helping drive revenue for the business and you're not raising your hand and saying, that was us, that was my team, we did that, huge missed opportunity. Because guess what? If you're not getting credit for it, somebody else is.
Agreed. So attribution, any way you can share across your team, to the executive team, to the board level, the value you're bringing back to the organization, and tie it to revenue, the better it will be. So find any way you can do that. This is one way you can add to show that attribution to the company. All right, so we asked here, what was the primary customer success engagement strategy? At least with this 700 and some odd survey respondents, 70% said their primary engagement strategy was high touch. And some of it has been shared. Some of it were back and forth, but 70% said they had some kind of high touch. 52% said they have some kind of some sense of a medium touch. 26 low touch, and 24 tech touch. Now there's some obviously across all of theirs that they say, hey, we do the spectrum. But a little surprised that we were a little surprised how many in this group said that they have a high touch. And so many, and the few that had tech touch, because I think there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of effort, and a lot of focus on digital customer success. Surprised that many people didn't have some sense of tech or low touch strategy as part of their repertoire. So any thoughts there, Kristi?
I mean, listen, we're going to see this in probably most companies. Unless you're only serving enterprise, you're going to have a diversified strategy across your entire customer book. There's probably no way you're going to service all of your customers the exact same way, unless you're super early stage and have 10 customers and you're kind of treating them all the same. At some point in your growth, in your journey, you're going to have to break that up, right? And as much as I like to think that all of our customers are created equal, how we work with them, not necessarily the value they're getting out of the partnership, right? But how we might work with them and how we engage might vary based on their needs and where they are in their journey, right? It doesn't even have to be based on revenue or things like that. So I do think what we're seeing here is representative of like companies taking a different approach because they've got a diversified book of business. What's interesting in the chat though, is a bunch of folks called out that number that we saw earlier, right? Like, how are you have 95 customers on average and have a high touch model? Remember, this is not representative of their only strategy. This is talking about that broken down. So I think you could have a small subset of your customers who have a high touch model, but because that's representative of maybe the bulk of your ARR, that could be your primary strategy because it's supporting the most amount of money. So I think depending on how people approach the question, it could probably alter the output here. But I mean, I think it's interesting to see how many companies are still focused on a high touch model, given all the conversations around scale.
Yeah. Back in when I was at Adobe running global customer success there for a portion of their business, we had 60% of our revenue managed. We had 20% of our customers make up 60% of our revenue. And so a strong high touch team, but a lot of effort on that long tail with the low touch. The other point that I saw in chat was, and I think it's a good point, is it'd be nice to be able to have an industry standard of what these mean. I don't know if we love the term high touch, medium touch, tech touch. These are common terms that are used, but what do they mean? It might be interesting to as come together as a community and have definitions of what those mean so that there is some consistency. It's certainly an action item or food for thought for us to take away. Next one, how often are you talking to your customers? Again, this kind of leans towards the data that we have. And you see that you can see where they break down quite a bit daily. So that would be a lot of higher touch CSMs, CSPs represented here. Weekly, 25%, biweekly, 16%, monthly, 29%. I think overall you'll see that there was an other slice that we didn't add here, but some 80% talk to their customers at least once a month, which was interesting in that regard as well. Let's continue on just for the sake of time. Where do CSMs spend most of their time? I don't think that there's really a lot of surprise here. Main areas are onboarding and adoption. So Donna, our good friend, the onboarding queen, is out there. She'll be happy to see that that's a big one. But that's where it seems like where we're spending our time onboarding. There's certainly onboarding, implementation, and training enablement happened at the beginning of the relationship. So those are kind of different activities in there. Sometimes onboarding consists of implementation and training and enablement, but for the sake of this survey, we broke those out differently. But adoption is huge, and then expansion of renewals. Kristi, any thoughts there? What some are asking, what do we consider define as adoption activities? Maybe do you want to give some thoughts on what you would define as adoption activities?
Sure. For us, I mean, we're going to put that in the scope of bucket of anything that's happening outside of the initial onboarding and implementation process that you might use to deploy and enable your customers. What's interesting here, though, is that you're not seeing a ton of CSMs focus on that. I think it is due to product complexity. You're probably seeing more specialized teams. And so the question here is focused on CSMs spending their time. I think outside of CSMs, you've got onboarding managers, training enablement teams popping up all over, implementation, you've got services teams. And so I think depending on the product and the scope of the work involved with onboarding, you're going to see more of that be handed off to teams that can really focus on that as a specialty. It's interesting to see, I think I'm more surprised to see how high these are for CSMs, but I think hopefully it just speaks to SaaS companies developing and designing products that are easy to use and intuitive to get customers on board into.
There you go. There you go. Thank you for adding that. Let's keep going. This was interesting. We looked at the different activities that CSMs do on a daily basis. And we broke it down into a lot of different activities, certainly updating spreadsheets, work with support, entering data in systems. But this was kind of interesting. We as we peeled back the onion, we saw that that an interesting trend where CSMs are saying they're spending more time on internal meetings and internal communication than external meetings and communication. Does that feel, I'm just curious on the chat, does that feel representative of your days? Do you get bogged down on internal meetings and internal communications, or are you spending the majority of your day? And
oh my gosh, there's so many yeses, my tummy hurts.
Okay, well, thank you for validating that, because we talked a little bit about it this morning, just Kristi and I saying, is this real? We certainly do everything we can to try to avoid, to try to skew it way in the favor of customer communication, customer meetings, and customer engagement. But I certainly know that it feels like that sometimes CSMs are out there spend so much internal when they would rather spend time external with customers. Kristi, any thoughts?
Oh my gosh, I'm just like so sad by this. I feel like if this chat was representative of this pie graph right now, we would be a lot higher than 50-something%. What I would just encourage you all to do, if you are a leader on this webinar, if you're a leader listening to this recording, please go back and look at the calendars. Go assess where your team is spending their time. If you've got frontline customer-facing teams spending more than 50% of their time doing internal work, you need to reassess, right? This is why your teams feel inundated. This is why they don't have enough time to do the work they need to. This is why their customers are suffering. Please redistribute the time allocation here. This is so critical. You need to go look at this.
I like what Mike Larson said. He says, my manager told us today, feel free to look at your calendar and cancel any meetings you don't think bring value to you. That's great. And one thing that I'd recommend I've done in the past is what I think they call it a time and motions analysis, where just take a week or two every quarter, 1 week a quarter, and have your CSMs measure their time and where they're spending their time. Identify what we call the non-value add activities versus the value add activities, kind of along the line with Mike. And break those out, and then make a goal that next quarter to remove one non-value added activity from your CSM's plate. Sometimes it requires collaborating with other stakeholders in the business, or building tools, or removing meetings or whatever. But measure it, make a plan to improve it, and then go back and see how you're doing the next quarter. I promise you won't regret that. So either do it quarterly or semi-annually. We've done it in the past with teams that I've led, and it's a huge value in raising awareness and changing the behavior and the time spent for your CSMs. Okay, next one. We looked at top tools outside of CRMs and CSPs. CSPs are customer success platforms like us. CRMs are Salesforce, HubSpot. We said, what are the top tools that CS professionals are using? These are the tools. So it looks like either kind of some kind of project management tool or a communication tool, customer engagement tool. Anything surprising here, Kristi?
I mean, I think what's surprising, I mean, none of the like Zoom, Gong, Slack, I don't think those were super exciting to me. The project management ones, it's interesting to see how much of the distribution is being focused there, right? Like you've got Asana, Trello, Monday. I mean, even spreadsheets, which I'm sure probably are kind of dovetailing into project management. That to me is really interesting. I know a big focus for us is streamlining some of that. And, you know, I'm just shocked to see how many teams are still heavily reliant on that for project management.
Okay, great. Yeah. So just, I know there's a lot of chatter. Where is HubSpot? Where is so-and-so? Remember, this is, we've removed CRM. So HubSpot, Salesforce, Pipedrive, etc. And we've removed customer success platforms. So we were on the list, ClientSuccess, Gainsight, those other types of platforms. We removed those to see what other solutions are customer success professionals using beyond CRMs and CSPs. So just a case. There's certainly, everybody's posting their favorite one in chat. There were certainly a whole host of others. These were the top ones that rose to the top of the list. Okay, where are companies investing? So interesting thing, we just ask, are you investing in these categories? And you could see where people listed as investments. So a lot are, overall, it's around the customer experience. So the top two were the onboarding experience. I'm sure, again, Donna was going to be happy about that, and others. And then the overall experience. So improving, removing friction in the experience, building tools, whatever it is to make sure your customers are having a much better and a simpler experience with your company. I think that's a great sign to see the continued focus on the overall customer experience. Any thoughts here, Kristi?
I'd be interested to see, as we think about customer experience and how teams are investing in that, I'd love to see that broken down and learn more about it. Yeah. I mean, honestly, where I think about the biggest place to probably impact customer experience outside of like the manual things, like where you think about CSMs or support or things like that, product. Right. I think product is like the biggest place to impact customer experience. We're mostly SaaS companies. That is what the customers are purchasing. So I'm wondering if that is where that 71% is going into, is creating a better product experience.
Yeah, I agree. That would be really interesting. Is customer experience, product experience, is it onboarding experience? Is it community? What is it? We'll have to look at breaking that out a little bit more, because it would be interesting to see where specifically they're investing around the customer experience. Certainly some continued investment in headcount, tools, and technology. And you can see the other areas of investment there that were shared with the team. Okay, last but not least, this is the section I call customer success as a culture. So we ask a series of questions that assess whether your company is embracing this concept we call customer success as a culture. That's putting customer success at the center of their culture and having it infused throughout everything: processes, meetings, discussions, headcount. The first question we asked was, do you believe that your company is a customer-centric company? We're actually surprised how high this is. And it's good. I'm happy. We continue to believe that it's high, because sometimes we feel like that the feedback coming back from customer success professionals is that their company is not customer centric. I do know that there was a study from Bain in years past that asked CEOs whether their company is customer centric. CEOs was like 80% believe they did. When they asked their customers and their perception, it was like 6%. I don't know, really low. Kristi, any thoughts on that? Do you feel like that's good? Does that surprise you?
I mean, it surprises me because I feel like it's really inaccurate. I think we want to believe that the companies that we work for are customer centric, but if we really sat down and like peeled back everything. I mean, think about it, like how everything you do as a company would dictate your customer centricity. And I see companies operating so internally focused. I mean, how many folks I speak to and I look at their customer journeys that are so inside out, not outside in. I mean, that alone should dictate that you're probably not getting it right. So I wish that 77% was true. I think that is a very happily inflated number. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. So then next one is, does your CEO get customer success? Does she or he understand it, get it, support it? 73% say that she or he does, which is great. The next one is customer success properly represented in board meetings? I'm disappointed, 51%. That should be way higher. Agree, Kristi?
Well, listen, how can we have 77% say that our company is customer centric and only 51% that we were properly represented in a board meeting?
Exactly.
I'm sorry to get so passionate about this, but like, Dave, for all the CEOs I've ever worked for, you're the only one who gets customer success that I've ever reported to. And that's 5 companies. I mean, listen, I think CEOs are making the investments. I think that they want to get it. I do believe that there is this intrinsic desire to get it, but they're still not wrapping their heads around it, right? We see that in how teams are staffed, how we are budgeted, how we are treated, represented. I mean, clearly, if we just look at the small representation, right? 5% of your company is representative of your customer success organization. That's so small, right? Like, so these numbers to me, highly inflated. I'm sorry, I'm getting very emotional. They don't tell me the right story. This is not right.
I think the question here is it the CEO or is it the board? Where's the responsibility really lie? Is it the board doesn't get it? Because a lot of times board meetings are the agendas are dictated by the board and what they care most about. So that might be something that we'll have to ask board members.
I feel like you gotta have a strong CEO. If you're a strong CEO, you should be able to have a healthy challenge debate in the boardroom, right? Or even outside the boardroom. But listen, if you really want to put your customers first, all the other metrics the investors want to see, that will come with it.
Yep. The next one, I think this is a huge call to action to this group. And this is, do you celebrate renewals as a company? I'm tired of hearing all of the various ways that sales teams celebrate sales deals, all creative ways, investment in tools and songs and whatever, sirens and everything. It's time for us to stand up and celebrate renewals just as much or more than new sales. We put in a lot of hard work as a customer success community. For every single renewal, we need to celebrate it. So I'm doing a call to action to this group to change this in your company. Find a way to celebrate success in your way, in a creative way, and let's double this in the next year. So everybody. That's the call to action. Next one is visibility. Is the company have company-wide visibility into customer success metrics? Only 56%. Again, we've got to do better. That we should be going into deep detail about customer success metrics in every town hall, in every quarterly meeting, in every update. The next one is companies speak. Do you just generally speak a lot about customer success? 77%. Which is, again, if you look at the dichotomy of this data, customer centricity, CEO gets it, speak about it, and then you see some of the lower ones in the middle. We certainly can do better. And the last one is customer advisory board. Kristi, on the customer advisory board, I give a little bit leeway there, just because I feel like
a lot of leeway there. It's hard. Customer advisory boards are not a low level of effort. They take time, resources, and budget to get it right. So if you don't have it, that does not mean you're not customer centric. So I'm with you on that one. 36%, I actually think it's pretty high. If you've got 36% of the companies represented here and you're doing it right, good for you.
Yeah, I agree. I think to do the customer advisory board right, there's a certain level of scale. There's a certain level of focus and dedication to that strategy. And so we certainly want to see it increase, but I give a little bit more credit there as far as sometimes you're just not ready for a formal customer advisory board. That doesn't mean you can't get feedback, valuable feedback through your customers in different ways. And hopefully we're doing that. Okay, before we leave, we're gonna look at how we changed year over year on this. So if you look at this year compared to last, we've unfortunately dropped. Oh, what have we done? Anyway, yeah, we've dropped. So if you look at the orange was to last year, in several of these, we've almost all of them, we've either dropped or stayed exactly the same. The last two we stayed exactly the same, but the others we've dropped. So we've got work to do, team, community. And we really encourage you to, all of us, to find ways to really build the DNA in our culture. And these are some ideas. These are just one of a handful of many different ideas to change your organization. But let's do it. Let's rally together as a community, individually and collectively, to find ways to increase this and see all of these increase over the next year. So we invite you to do that. That's it, Kristi. So there's a lot there. Certainly, hopefully there's some really interesting insights and learnings that you can take back to your business. We'd love to answer any questions. So maybe Kristi, let's go through some of the questions. We also, I will say right now, feel free to send feedback, like what questions you want us to add next year. If you just send us a note or send us something in chat or the Q&A, tell us what you want to learn next year, and we'll look to continue to evolve and improve the survey next year. So Kristi, what questions?
All right, looking at the questions, I think some of them we answered. Like there was a question about, when we looked at the breakdown on customer success distribution, individual contributors versus leaders, we did the two breakouts. So I think that question came early before we did the breakdown as individual contributors and then leaders. Another question came, curious to see your experience with moving customer success to a monetized program. So Dave, any thoughts on that?
Questions on moving it to a monetized program?
Yeah, so I guess now charging for customer success. Not sure we covered anything about that here, but
that's a good question. We should add maybe next year is how many. I'd be curious on that. I think there's a time and a reason for that, and there is a valid strategy. I'm generally not leaned into that. I don't believe that as the standard. Let's put it that. I do think that in some companies, in some situations, there is a definite value in monetizing it. I'm just not there yet. I don't know. I don't know what else to share in that regard.
All right, there was some questions around I think just understanding the companies that we pulled data from. So understanding if they were private or public companies for the responses. So I think there's probably some more data we could provide for folks around company size just to get that. I know the compensation question also drove a lot of conversation, as money always does. But obviously you had a lot of our international friends saying that some of those compensation bands were really high. And then folks in the US obviously saying that they were very low. So, maybe even doing some breakdowns on some of that data for the geos could be really interesting for folks so they understand, do they feel like they are in line with where their industry is in their region as opposed to it being just a generic breakdown.
Yeah, I will say I just brought up the question, and it was OTE. We asked, what is your total compensation range, including bonuses, variable, and quota, et cetera. So we asked it at least OTE, whether folks responded that way. But certainly fair enough feedback. And I think there's next year we'll look to break down some of these into different regions. And maybe it's a follow-up white paper that we do, Kristi.
We have all this great data. I'd love to go spend some more time in it too.
Yes, but I will say just in general, the survey included all different stages, whether it be early stage, late stage, public companies, and all different segments and all different geo regions across the US. We'll do a better job next year breaking it down, some of these metrics down a little bit so that it's much more reflective of your company size and region and location.
Great.
Any other questions?
I think those were the main ones. Someone asked, is outcomes related to NPS? But I think we spoke a bit about that, or outcome related to health score. So I think we talked about tracking actually the customer's objectives as part of that and that breakdown. I think everything else were questions that we eventually answered as we kind of went through. So I think we're good on the questions.
All right. Well, with that, then we will say goodbye today. We're grateful that everyone joined us today. Awesome and engaging community. Hopefully, again, there's some insights and learnings today that will help you individually and collectively as a team or leaders. If there's anything we can do, Kristi and I and our whole team are here for you. But thanks for joining us this week. Boot camps are going to start up again in October.
I get one more month of break.
Yes. So September is a big month of events that we're hosting or attending. So we hope that we'll see you at one of those events. And then we'll be back with Kristi's boot camps in October with some more good stuff. So in the meantime and in between time, thanks for everything. Thanks for being a great community, and keep us in mind if we can ever do anything for you.
Bye, everyone.
Hey, everyone.